another episode of My Duke and I. Hello, Denise.
Hello, Anita. Hello, listeners. What will we be discussing today, Anita?
Today, we will be discussing the Commonwealth Trade Meeting where senior policymakers, business leaders, and owners will meet in Nairobi, Kenya. Camfed Garden won big at the Chelsea Garden Show. Prince Harry played polo in Rome to raise funds for Sentebale. Prince Harry wins a judgment against Splash Agency, and a formal apology was given and accepted from Splash Agency for invading his and Duchess Meghan's privacy. A flower is named after Archie Harrison at the Chelsea Flower Show. Harry and Meghan will have a second resident at Buckingham Palace when they are in London, and the upcoming engagements of the Duke of Sussex. So, Denise, can you tell us about the Commonwealth trade that will be taking place in Nairobi, Kenya, amongst the Commonwealth nations' leaders?
Yes, certainly. On May 15th to the 16th, members of the Regulatory Connectivity Cluster of the Commonwealth held their first meeting in London to discuss and agree on policy to achieve $2 trillion worth of intra-Commonwealth trade by 2030. These policymakers came from across the Commonwealth, and they agreed to use good regulatory practices to boost trade to help their business flourish. At a time when Britain is struggling with Brexit, it's really important for them to have some sort of plan in place to sustain themselves when they exit the EU. So the group was welcomed by the Deputy Secretary of State at the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy in the UK. He said exporters and investors need stability. They need to know that regulation is consistent and predictable in each of the countries. And by coordinating all the approaches to regulation, they can nurture a strong business environment, reduce non-tariff barriers, as well as propel the inclusive growth and development that many of these Commonwealth countries would like to see. The senior policymakers, business leaders and owners will also be meeting in Nairobi, Kenya this week, the 28th and the 29th of May. And in that meeting, they're going to be promoting trade and investment between small and medium-sized business across the Commonwealth. So they're going to have representatives from more than 200 organizations, and the second intra-Commonwealth Trade Summit will begin. The Commonwealth General also said that the intra-Commonwealth trade has been growing in spite of the slowdown in the world trade growth, and it's now over 20% of the Commonwealth countries' total trade with the world. So the Commonwealth is actually doing quite well, and everyone else is slowing down. Their trade growth is 20% of the world's total trade, and I think that's pretty impressive. So he went on to say a strengthened intra-Commonwealth trade and investment cooperation with the SME, which is acronym for Small Medium-Sized Enterprise, at the center has the potential to revive global trade and growth and contribute towards advancing trade-related aspects of the SDGs. So as the UK prepares to Brexit, I think it's important to know that the Brexit supporters have championed the British trade that will rely heavily upon the Commonwealth. So, people of color make up a vast majority of the Commonwealth. And this is another reason why we have to make sure that we stay on top of the way they're treating Meghan as a person of color within the United Kingdom, because at the end of the day, if and when the UK exits the European Union, they're expecting the Commonwealth to play a very important role in their economy.
So let's talk about Camfed and their win at the Chelsea Garden Show. So at the Chelsea Garden Show, Camfed won gold in the category of a space to grow, and they dubbed it actually giving girls in Africa a space to grow. So what I particularly liked about their garden is that it was a drought resistant garden. So basically it's a resilient garden to the elements of the environment. And typically we would find the different types of gardens at the Chelsea Garden Show being more of showcasing flowers, but here Camfed showcased a sustainable garden where they had crops that potentially could sustain a community. And what is so beautiful about this garden, and I thought that this is avant-garde thinking, in the sense that these crops that they had at the garden were enriched with vitamins and minerals and iron, which is what, especially in these places in Africa where where there's a daily struggle with obtaining nutrients or food. So to have food that already has a high content of those things in them, it just makes me admire that type of thinking in terms of coming up with an idea that that sort of creates a blanket solution to the problem that most of these areas face in Africa. So that to me was really powerful, to be able to think about the nutrients of the garden, to think about the resilience of the garden. To me, it's powerful. And one thing I want to point out, in this day and age, when we think about genetically modified food, here, these foods that they're growing in that garden, which is meaningful in so many ways. Not only does it look beautiful, but it is also an edible garden. And to grow it in a natural way, instead of having things that are modified, genetically modified, to me, just makes me really excited that day one, because this is something different from what we've seen. And this is something not taking away anything from previous winners or presenters at the garden show. What this means to me is that they're doing something that is beneficial. Not only does it look lovely and pleasing to the eyes, but it is also beneficial in the sense that it is nourishing, and it is something that could be used not only for its visual aesthetic, but it is beneficial nutritionally, wherever this garden potentially can be replicated in Africa and in different parts of the world.
Well, one of the things too that I liked about what the young ladies said, they said that as this garden was designed, one of the things that they did, they said it also embodied Meghan's vision and her role of empowering women through education. And so that vision that inspired them, that Meghan's vision that inspired them, made them put a lot of thought into it, into creating this garden, because number one, it was environmentally friendly. They used a lot of solar energy for the irrigation system. They also made sure that it would adapt to the type of climate that they live in the sub-Sahara regions of Africa. And I think it's really important that someone like Megan could have this kind of influence, that these young ladies, these girls, actually put her vision, brought life to her vision by creating this garden. She empowered them to create this garden using the education that they were getting. And I think that in itself is like really marvelous. I also remember last year, Harry went over there and encouraged them more on behalf of his wife. And he went and visited the Camfed school or facilities. And they sent back, Megan sent messages to these young ladies, and they sent back messages to her. And I think it's nice that as a couple now, they're able to see their vision come to fruition in the creation of this garden. And even though at the onset they said that they were not able to show pictures of Prince Harry on his visit last year to Camfed with the students, yet I think at the end of the day, Harry and Meghan, the Sussexes, they were also big winners in this show, because these young ladies were able to get the Montessori school in London to sponsor them. They had a designer. I'm going to call her name. I think her name is Jodie Lidgard. She helped them to design the outdoor space. And Montessori International City Asset Management helped, I guess, with the funding of all of this. And so, a group of people came together to take this vision and make something out of it. And at the end of the day, I think the Sussexes also won big too, because they got not just a gold medal, but they also got the People's Choice Award. So yeah, that's big.
Yes. And as you said, this is, with this, the garden really embodies Duchess Meghan. And one thing that I also wanted to point out, that the garden is really compact, because here, you don't need a lot of land to create a garden of such kind in terms of its nutritional value and its yield. So what they're also showing people is not only can you build a drought resistant and a garden that is biofortified, with crops, but you can also get the same result from a small space, because there are some individuals that participated in the garden that they were talking about how they planted gardens in the past, and they had a lot of space to plant the garden. However, the yield was very small compared to the current garden that they planted on a much smaller scale, but yet the yield was much larger than the large space that they had planted their gardens in the past. So I see three things coming out of this type of garden: the fortification of the different plants in the garden, as well as utilizing space in an effective way, and planting in a way that sort of suits the environment that the garden will be growing in terms of drought resistant and pest resistant and what have you. So that's beautiful. I love it. It's science, and I like science.
Yeah, it was environmentally friendly.
Environmentally friendly.
Yeah, even using the sun's rays through solar power for the irrigation system. That's brilliant, because if they're in an area where they have no electricity, guess what? They just created their own through solar panels. Yes. So yes, I think that was brilliant. And again, the impact of our Duchess.
Yes, and we must remember that although Meghan and Harry was not a part of the presentation or just the whole formulation of the garden. However, the spirit of Meghan were in these women, and that's how they came up with it.
Definitely. Yes. They said in their words, to quote one of them, they said Megan's vision embodied their creation of this garden. Yeah, they said they were embodied by Megan's vision and her role of empowering women through education. That was a direct quote from one of the young ladies.
Yes.
And so, and the other thing that we need to point out is that what this is doing is showing a woman how she can feed her family.
Absolutely.
And if you feed your family, you can also feed your community. If you feed your community, you can feed your nation.
That's right.
So that's the beauty of this empowerment.
Yes, definitely. And here's a form of education there through gardening and everything that Megan stands for, Duchess Megan stands for, the whole empowerment of women and the self-sustaining of women. And so this is really nice. I just love this whole concept. It just really blew me away.
As we have said before, previous broadcasts, you can give a man fish and you'll feed his family for a day, but you teach him how to fish and you will feed him. You can feed his family for life.
Absolutely.
And so here it is again. You can give a man a fruit basket, he'll feed his family, or a woman a fruit basket, she'll feed her family for a day, but you teach her how to plant and grow her own fruits.
Yes.
And not only for her family for that week, month, but now for generations, because if each generation pass these techniques on to the other, then you have a family being able to feed itself for a lifetime.
Absolutely. Oh, yes.
That's a great concept.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, that's definitely our Duchess. Yes.
That is.
So, let's talk about Prince Harry polo tournament in Rome, where he raised money for Sentebale. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Prince Harry went to Sentebale to do one of his annual polo fundraisers to raise money for the charity that he and Prince Cieso founded back in 2006. This charity was founded in remembrance of Princess Diana, who went there to aid some of the children that were victims of AIDS and some of the children that were actually infected with AIDS. So she was the one that actually brought the world's attention to these kids. Harry was only 12 when she was killed, but by the age of 18, he wanted to make sure that her legacy lived on. And so he suggested creating this charity to help. And with the help of Prince Cieso, they both founded this charity. And yes, since 2006, and it's continued, and it's growing bigger by the year. And so one of the things that he does every year is play polo, raise funds through his skill, and he's a very skilled polo player. He's able to raise a lot of funds through that to continue to sustain this charity, giving the children there a new lease on life from the funds that's received. One of the nice things too that this year his good friend Nacho is the ambassador for Sentebale. So it was nice to have Nacho there, Nacho was there also last year.
Yeah.
And so he's the spokesman for the charity now, and I think he helps to organize the polo games and help to select the countries that they're played in. So last year we know he played in the UK because Meghan was also present. But this year, little baby Archie kept her at home, but they were both there in spirit to cheer Daddy Sussex on. And and so in Harry's speech, after the event, which he won, he told the people there that so far the charity had reached over 100,000 people who needed not just aid, but also reproductive education in safe sex, and they were receiving health and the support they needed to understand that HIV is no longer a death sentence. So they're learning that they can truly thrive and not just survive AIDS. And I think that's a big thing. Yes. So yeah, doing an awesome job in continuing his mother's legacy and making sure that she's not forgotten and that her work lives on.
And it's just really wonderful that they continue to raise funds because, as we know it, Eastern and Southern Africa remain regions that is most affected by the HIV epidemic, as Prince Harry and Meghan noted on their Instagram account. And they say these regions account for 45% of the world's HIV infections, and Lesotho and they said Botswana have the second and third highest infection rate of HIV in the world, with children often being too afraid to access the life-saving treatments and care available, because there's still the stigma that is associated with this virus, and so the fact that Prince Harry and Prince Yeso was able to, to create this organization to support and to help, people that has been affected by this, horrendous disease, is just tremendous. And the funds that they're raising is still needed, even though the population, many parts of the world, the infection rate has decreased. But in Africa, we know that it's still a problem. It's still an epidemic. And yes, definitely, to see what Prince Harry has been able to do in Africa, in this in Lesotho, for these young people is just amazing. And the fight continues, and we just have to work on the stigma part of it and continue to fight these diseases.
The stigma will be removed through education.
Absolutely.
As more and more people are educated, and especially when they start out with early education, that's the key.
Okay, so Prince Harry wins a judgment against Splash Agency and a formal apology. So basically what had happened is that Splash Agency had sort of rented a helicopter and flew very close to the ground over Meghan and Harry's home in the Cotswold and took pictures of inside of their house. I think it was the bedroom, living room, and other parts of their home, and they felt like it was their privacy, and it's not they felt like their privacy had been invaded. Their privacy had been invaded, and they felt like it was an unsafe place to reside.
Or it was a security threat for them.
It was. Yes,
because,
it was.
As we all know, there's been threats on their life.
Yes.
So by this invasion of privacy, it did pose a security threat.
Yes.
So so he had to, they had to move out of the home.
Yes, so it did pose a security threat to them, and they had to move out of the home because now people who did not know where they lived or had never seen inside, now that was on world view for everybody to see and
Yeah.
who knows what could happen. We have all these crazy people. We could definitely see how Meghan has been treated by by the public. So it was
Well, it's
just
not so
yes.
much by the public. It's,
Mm-hmm.
and I think sometimes we we forget the root of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
This disrespect, this racist hate has been cultivated by the British media. They're the ones that's been fueling
Mm-hmm.
and fanning the flames of hate, causing both Harry and Meghan
Mm-hmm.
to have threats against them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we can no longer afford to not lay the blame at the feet of who is doing it.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be blunt and call out these reporters,
Mm-hmm.
like Emily Andrews,
Mm-hmm.
who was one of those people that had a big front page article on their home.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the Sun was one of them. The Times was another paper.
Mm-hmm.
They all had big front page articles on their home, and then what they do, they overemphasize or guesstimate the value of everything, and in further instigating, they say that all of this is at public expense, creating a lot of anger and a lot of hate